Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today and welcome to our session called Building Culture in the Workplace, Best Practices, Lessons Learned, and M&A Considerations. So I've been so looking forward to this conversation. I love the topic and I'm thrilled to be joined by my special guest today. My name is Tim Morton. I'm one of the founders of Prompt AI and very excited to guide you through this important conversation. And for those joining us today, thank you. And if you have any questions, please share them in the chat and we'll allow time at the end to answer your questions. We're also recording this session and we'll share it following today's discussion. And we'll also make sure we get you uh, uh, a blog post after the session that summarizes some of the key themes, so you can uh, reference that. So, building culture within the workplace is not easily done. And my guest today, um, you know, she may make it look like it's easy, but that's so not the case. And I'm so honored and pleased to introduce our guest speaker today, Colleen Quinn. She is an amazing culture leader, an M&A and business transformation specialist, and in my books, an overall change guru. And I've seen firsthand the incredible difference that Colleen makes with clients. Um, how her integrated and enterprise-wide approach builds change capabilities within organizations. So thrilled to have Colleen here today to share her insights with you. And so welcome, Colleen, and thank you for joining us. And over to you for a bit of an introduction.
Okay. Thanks a lot. It's great to be here. I too share your passion for this topic. As you said, my background deep into business transformation space through large company reorganizations, setting up second site, offshore, looking at many different aspects of it, especially large projects. And of course, merger and acquisition has been a big theme. And so look forward when I look forward to how you're going to direct us through this topic and try to be concise because it's a big area, but thrilled to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm really excited. So why don't we just jump into the discussion and what if we start thinking around or start discussing around culture as a driver of belonging and inclusion. And so Colleen, from your experience, how can organizations move beyond traditional, those DEI checklists to create a culture of psychological safety and belonging, especially in work environments where, the water cooler culture just doesn't exist. And we know in the past that the water cooler was so important, but in some places it just doesn't exist anymore.
Right. It's a great question. And it's, you know, uh, culture. Well, first, I'd say it's knowing that you need to move beyond the DEI checklist because, you know, and it's good to have the basic framework in place, but, we've learned a lot. So we're at a point where we can really evolve and do more in operationalizing it and deepening DEI in our organizations. It's fundamentally about culture is our lived experience in how we feel seen, heard, listened to, uh, um, and how we feel coming to work. It's a very important. So belonging, and when you look at, each company has its own needs from a culture perspective, but we're also informed by what's going on in the collective. And you know the narrative that's in the collective now. So it's really pushing on this sense of belonging and psychological safety. So belonging, and we all want to belong, it's that connection point, which is the foundation of culture. How are we connecting to the company? When I come into work, do I feel energized? Do I feel flat? Do I feel drained? Do I have to drag myself out of bed to get myself there? It's because if you look behind that, you want to understand what's behind if you're not feeling energized. So that belonging, um, and there's safety and trust behind that, and respect, the core fundamentals of things. The psychological safety, it's about, that I can bring new ideas, I can share my opinions, I can challenge constructively, I can admit when I'm wrong. You know, I can uh, I can say I need help and trust that I'll be met with care, not consequences.
Yeah, and I just in thinking about culture, and one of the, as you were talking, one of the reflections for me is um, uh, you can learn a lot about culture by how people feel on Sunday evening. After
Yes,
the
yes,
it's the yeah, people are so excited for Saturday, and then they wake up Sunday and they're dreading all through the day because it's back to five
right,
days. I
right,
mean, that says a lot.
right. So the work of culture is getting in behind that and what's the why. And that's where small gestures and actions can go a long way. And it's allowing that conversation to be brought in. I'm dragging myself in. And, to a certain degree, it is about normalizing conversations where it's okay to talk about, do you feel stressed? Do you feel overworked? Uh, are you feeling some anxiety about something new that you're doing in their job that you're not as comfortable with? So um, it's a big area, and that's why it can sound, very easy, but it needs tending, right? It needs some, deliberate actions.
Yeah. And it certainly isn't the flavor of the week or the flavor of the month if you're going to start to tackle psychological safety and culture.
No, no. And it takes courage and it takes vulnerability to really lean into that area because that's the foundation of building trust, to really share. Teams model their leaders.
Yeah.
So, to bring in that vulnerable, can a leader say, oh, I don't know, let me look into that? Or I tried this and it didn't work. And so sharing some of those small experiences can go a long way in setting the mode.
Yeah. And speaking about leaders, like you've got an incredible passion for building trust across organization and with leaders, and thinking about leaders and the people centric and value based leadership. So if we think about your experiences, what does it look like for you when leaders truly lead with emotional intelligence, um, leading with values, especially in moments of vulnerability and organizational tension?
Great, great question. We could spend a lot of time here. But what's important is employees really expect leaders to be emotionally intelligent and socially intelligent. They expect that they're trained in it and they bring that. And that's part of what they want the leader to model. And so if we look at what that looks like, are they self-aware? Do they understand the impact of their emotions, their behaviors, their tone? their energy that they're bringing into the workplace, how they're managing stress. And if they're aware of it, are they good at self-managing it?
Yeah.
And then moving into, the relationship building, because employees look at the leaders for the keys. And if they don't, what I love about employees is, they hold accountability for leaders. And, they want to see leaders collaborating and sharing with each other. And they want to look out and go, oh, we can see positive dynamics between these leaders. So, it starts with employees, but it starts with the leaders. And it's building that trust, and it's not withholding information. It's not trying to just lean into your silo and say, let me just do what I want to do. Um, and um, it's engaging the employees. So it's making people it's very, trendy to talk about being people centered, and it's been for a while, but it makes a big difference in how it plays out and what it feels like in the day-to-day workplace. And sadly, I was just looking at, some of the leading thought leaders in this space on, operationalizing values. And the latest stats are that only about 25% of companies do that well. We still have a tendency for values, um, uh, to be, companies are proud that employees can recite the values. And that's part of it being aware of it. But there's a lot of behaviors behind the values that make it real. That's what changes the how do I feel in how I do my work and in coming into work. And sometimes with values, leaders want to, or the company feels they've got to mirror what they do and showcase that, and it's part of it. But it's also okay to have stretch some aspiration within the values and the behaviors that support those values, and aspirational reach and stretch for the leaders as well as the employees. It's not just pointing going, oh, employees, you've got to get better at that. The leaders can get better at challenging constructively, not leading with silos, stepping in and making decisions, paying attention to some of the cultural needs of the group. Um, uh, so it's, a lot of what we're talking about is that deepening, that operationalizing. It's making it very visible and very tangible.
Yeah. And I know over the years I've worked at places where the values on the wall or the values on the internet for a lot of employees just felt like a joke. We don't live those are
Yeah,
just those just exist. Those just
yeah,
exist, uh, but we don't live them. And
yeah.
it's uh, it's fascinating. And you also spoke to that dynamic of the leader. And I was just thinking about that humanity of the leader and the ability of leaders um, to be vulnerable and be human. And it's um,
Yes.
it's it's not something that necessarily is taught in school, but it's so important for
Yes.
leaders to grow into.
Yeah. And for a leader to demonstrate managing conflict, to de-escalate a situation, to show respect, and to check in and go, what's working? How are you doing? Where are you feeling stretched? Uh, all of that becomes, that's showing the humanity. Um, doing, and allowing the open dialogue. to challenge, to have somebody say, I don't think that's a good idea, or I wouldn't do that now, and to be and to be able to receive and have that dialogue.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's building that relationship of you said we did, and a lot of the values-based leadership is making sure there's all kinds of feedback forms and opportunities. We can fall into the trap where people and culture as an engagement group, but it's you really want to hear from the front line, and these connection points of what's it like on the day to day, because it's leaders love to be lulled into everything's fine. And so it keeps it real, and hey, this might need attention, never from a blame or judgment or critical perspective, but it's from that curiosity of what's going on. And a question I love putting on agendas, and and because of my love for it, some companies have adopted it, but bringing into meetings, where's the friction?
yeah,
That we can openly talk about, what is it? Is it workflow? Is it relationship? Is it, personality dynamics? Um, where's the distraction?
yeah, yeah. I love that. Where is the friction? Where is the distraction? It
Yeah.
is a great, it is a
Yeah.
great question too.
It's great fun to put up WTF on a slide and people go, whoa, Colleen, we didn't expect that from you. And it's like, no, 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 don't go there. It's where's the
No,
friction?
yeah,
And that's part of it. You bring the fun into it. We can approach we can make some of these topics very heavy. And um and, it's also about letting teams guide. Employees are very resourceful, very creative um, in presenting issues, but solutions as well, and opportunities.
yeah. Oh my goodness. And um, you talked about the importance of emotional intelligence and social intelligence, and I think too, with companies starting to adopt AI, that's going to even become more and more important
Yes,
as we go.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And working on supporting how AI can support, not replace, but support.
yeah, indeed. Well, let's continue to build a little, but let's talk and think about the culture dynamic for hybrid and remote workplaces. So, just thinking through that, what advice would you have for leaders looking to intentionally cultivate culture within, a hybrid or remote environment where visibility is low and outcomes matter more than face time?
Yes, and you know, uh, part of the answer is in your question, because you do need to be you need to be very intentional and cultivate it. You do need to be deliberate. Um, it used to be uh, um, that it was the big deal to make sure everybody was on camera, and that was sort of uh, but that's not what it's about, and it's about building that connection. And don't want to get prescriptive here, because teams are fantastic about coming up with ways that they can find connection. But you can do digital shout outs. You can rotate the chairing and facilitating of the meeting. You find a way for the quiet voices to be heard. um, but it's also building in some of the social time, because some of the social time is where we build the connection and where we feel we belong. So sometimes teams will have a coffee chat and they're just connecting, or leaders will build in intentionally, the first 15 minutes because you're sort of mimicking what goes on in the office. When you gather for a meeting, there's some connection, there's some chatter, checking in, how did your weekend go? And so you build it into the conversation. And you do things, some groups do wrap up Fridays and they sort of do a check in and, share a funny story, a lesson learned, something that worked well for them that week, what they're planning for the weekend. It's keeping that connection. But, to the point where, uh, outcomes, we all love meaningful work. That's a big motivator and driver for us. So, um, it becomes about connection, not coordination, and we can fall into uh, the meeting online as a transaction to get something done, and it's going beyond that to the connection point and building the rationale, getting people excited. That's a connection point. We all want to feel we're contributing and working on something that has values. So, creating that rally and rising to the occasion or just leaning into get something done. There's an outcome to it, that we can feel good about contributing and and managing well. And how that serves is when we feel that connection to purpose, it just makes us very resilient. And when it gets tough, we can lean in because we've got the purpose as an underlining motivator of what it is that we're trying to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think for me the big part of that is that meaningful work and tying it back to the meaningful work and um, involving everyone, and then finding those ways to leverage everyone's strengths or help even on
Yes,
these remote teams for
yes,
people to grow.
yes, yes. Yeah, and find ways of having people showcase his strength for, part of a project or to facilitate part of a meeting, and you start to sort of share that.
Yeah. Oh, excellent, excellent. And just a reminder for those that are joining us, we will be sharing the recording, but as well, feel free to drop questions in the chat or into the Q&A. So, and you touched a little bit about this in the last question, but just wanted to go into that voice of the employee and that co-creation of culture, because that's so important. So, how do you feel that organizations and leaders within organizations can better empower employees to co-create that culture rather than them just being passive recipients of it? And with that, what small or visible actions, can they play in building that trust?
Okay, another big,
I
a,
know.
a, a big uh, topic, but we've been doing voice of the employee surveys for years, and they've always had value. But I'll say that it has created a mindset where it sort of makes companies believe culture is built for employees. It's important because it's for employees, and culture is built with employees. And so it's really involving their input. And we talked about having feedback loops and building those connections and building. I've done a lot of work in the transformational space, and I'm a big believer in small actions can lead to big change. The brilliant work with James Clear and Atomic Habits, right? How you stack the concept of 1%, just do 1% better, and that 1% can really compound over time. It's the same idea because we do tell ourselves, and there's a myth that culture takes years and years and it's hard slugging. And I don't believe that because it's conscious choices and we can change now, and we can really move and make a lot of headway. Doesn't mean we can't have aspiration and we can't evolve. For sure, that's what it's about. But the small actions are, you know it's things that you'd think are common sense, but a simple good morning, using people's name. I can't tell you how many times I hear from employees, if we're going through change, about a leader walking through an area and not saying good morning. And like it's, that visibility is so important always, but particularly when you are going through change, because it's really signaling you matter to me. I care. Um, so the small gestures, I mean, we could spend a lot of time just talking on it, but it is, uh, if somebody shared something personal with you, follow up and go, hey, how was that kids' concert? It's saying thank you, leaving a sticky note on a desk place, or, a text message or a sticky note on the laptop to say thank you. It's showing up and being really present, showing
Yeah.
up for yourself at work and showing up for others. And, so it's that noticing, it's that social awareness, that self-awareness. If somebody put an effort into a presentation, it's saying, hey, you put a lot of work into that. That was well done. There's just so many ways. And if you encourage teams to lean into doing that, you know, uh, one of my clients just did a mirror campaign where they wrote positive messages on mirrors in the male and female washrooms. And, you know, uh, not assigned washrooms, where it's just motivational messages, right? You matter, but it's those little things. And you know what it's like as a consultant. You go out to companies all the time. What you see when you show up and you're waiting, and what you see in the reception area. What you see with the people, how they're exchanging as they walk by, how you're greeted. Um, there's so many small gestures and actions that really uh, create a very strong grounding in trust and respect and kindness. you
Yeah.
know Even simply being clear on expectations, and sort of the communications, and having updates and explaining the why, um, can go a long way for people.
Yeah. And it reminds me, and I might have shared this with you years ago, but um, you know, one time in a client, I would always go there. I was early, but there was one person who was always earlier, and I would say good morning as I passed them every day, and they would not even acknowledge me. And finally, they broke down and started to laugh, because they couldn't. He just won't give up. He just won't give up. And from that point, I always at least get a smile and and an acknowledgement, and as well, for me, it was always important as well for that person to let them know, acknowledge them, and let them know I do see them. And and it was very important.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we have a comment. We've got a comment in the chat from Laura, who mentions a valued mentor once said, "You build culture every day," and she said, "Agreed that culture is a conscious choice, and we can make it now."
Yes. Well said. Well said. And and that's the point, because it's what's in the day is sort of what's in the year. What's in the micro is in the macro. And it really is about shared connection, moments of shared connection, not memos.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And listening is very big. Listening, it's very important for people to feel heard, and creating the time to listen. And whether it's an idea or concern, and help facilitate, and see if there's something behind what's being raised. And I think we can all relate to a time when we're speaking to somebody, and we know they're distracted, they're not hearing a word we've said, or they might even be typing on their email, or checking their phone, or doing whatever. So it's that stopping and pausing and listening
yeah,
can go a long way.
yeah. It really does. And just that being present with someone,
Yeah,
even
yeah,
and even if
yeah,
you can't,
yeah,
letting them know
yeah,
at that moment you can't. That, hey,
yeah,
I just need to, I need to take care of this. This your priority too, and
yeah,
I'll come back right away.
yeah. And to Laura's comment, in the day to day, like the day to day, and paying attention to that, and the small gestures, and understanding how much we are demonstrating culture, and that's rewarding for people to see already. And that that can go so much further than a delayed big program, right? It's um and becomes very important when you're in the merger space.
Oh gosh, yeah. And even, and even in that space, thinking about uh, you know, some of what we see with prompt AI, just that ability as well to understand sentiment of
Yes,
people when they're in that place, and giving them a safe environment to
yes,
share their
yeah,
sentiment without fear, and also to acknowledge and share what it is about their culture that is so important for them to protect, or what they want to
right,
improve or
right,
enhance.
right.
And that becomes so valuable along those M&As.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So um, we touched a little bit about belonging, but I just want to think in um, about that whole integration of well-being into culture. So um, in your experience, how can companies move from this, performative well-being initiatives to truly embedding mental, physical, and financial wellness into their culture pillars? Especially today with so much stress and burnout that we're seeing, because we're seeing stats across North America where the burnout rate is over 40%.
Yeah, well, again, we're at this time where we have some experience with it now, and it's about deepening and operationalizing it. It's about going beyond the yoga class. And that's not to put the yoga class down, that is an element of well-being. But it can be used as a ticky mark. Okay, we've done something for wellness. And it's always about sort of how do we move beyond that? And uh, you do want to check in with things like pulse surveys and, using AI and tools to do the sentiment. But again, it's how do you feel? How do you feel? And that's the benchmark. And it's opening up that discussion because it's about feeling safe and well-being is not having fear. And so if you've got something on your mind, that you can speak that up. So, it comes back to um, I can freely say I need help, as we had said, and it's met with care, not consequences. And you are just really paying attention and doing pulse checks. And they can be very easy. At the end of a meeting, hand out a sheet and people just weigh in on how they're feeling. And, it's approaching it from many different ways. But it's understanding that you're creating this well-being of how you feel coming into the workplace. And more and more the financial health of the company is of great interest to employees. So that financial health of the company is an important part, as well as providing resources and tools for um, the just improving financial literacy, seeking out a therapist. It's, as we talked about, normalizing conversations. It's okay to talk about how you feel, what's going on, the the mental, where you might be feeling stress. And leaders can do a great job in facilitating that by checking in and sort of saying, how are you feeling? What's going on? What needs attention? Um, and
Yeah.
and paying attention when something does surface to explore. This is where leading with curiosity is important, to go underneath to see what might be driving that.
Yeah. And and I think years ago, and maybe it's still the same with some organizations, but uh, the expectation was that everybody was one dimensional. And
Yes.
it was just,
Yes.
okay, this is my
Yeah.
this is my work persona, and uh and leave the rest at home. And as soon
Yes.
as you walk through that door, you are uh you're a gray suit, uh
Right. Right.
whatever that is.
Right.
And I think it's so good that that is changing.
Right. And that's that call for emotional intelligence. Who you are is who shows up at work. There's alignment. I'm not putting on a mask. It's like there's alignment there. It's sort of what you see is what you get. And leaders can do a great job in modeling that and facilitating that. And language is really important here, and how we talk about things. Uh, it's like, do people go, oh, they're out on leave? And, it's like, holding people accountable. It's like, it's um, helping them understand the impact of that behavior and the language,
Yeah. And I
and
think too.
how that can shut down an
Yeah.
organization, and someone who genuinely might want to come forward sort of holds back, right?
Yeah. And with that hold back, sometimes it's so important for people managers to notice with their team when there is something that's very out of the ordinary and that
Yes. Yeah.
continues.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is, and that's part of that social awareness, building that perception and intuition of when you walk through. And that's why the visibility and being present and the connection, if you're online, is important, because you'll notice a behavior, you'll notice something in the personality or a response that's different. Used to do a lot of work in the call center space, place, and you could walk in and you feel this hum, and you could get very good at just sort of walking on the floor and go, okay, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can hear it. It's like that
Yeah.
that 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 tone, that hum of everything being copacetic. It was not there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've certainly seen it where you walk into a meeting room and you don't even have to say something. You know that, okay,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
big is
yeah,
underfoot
yeah.
here.
Yeah, and watching for the meeting after the meeting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sort of saying, there's more here. What's the elephant in the room, and helping facilitate bringing that into the discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's and just kind of continuing down the same path around purpose-driven work and culture alignment. So uh, for you and working with leaders, how can leaders meaningfully connect employees and their daily work to a greater purpose within the organization? And then from there, how does that alignment influence engagement and culture over time?
Well, it does need intention to want to draw that connection and help to do that, and you can draw it, and that each, every role does have an impact. And, we love stories. We learn from stories. So sharing an employee story, a customer story, something that happened in um, the community. Uh, a leader can also ask about, what has you most excited about our vision, mission, purpose, and see where people go with the responses so they can assess where the gaps might be, that they can build a better linkage and alignment with where the gaps might be. But when we are aligned, like, we are purpose driven people, we love meaning, and so it just builds a resilient, flexible, responsive organization when we really get grounded in the purpose. And it's not as hard as what people think, because sometimes people, you talked about the poster on the wall. Well, people can feel like that with a vision, mission, and purpose, and it is drawing that and drawing it down through the values and drawing it down through the behaviors and linking it to the outcomes, facilitating some of the celebrations and uh, it all links back to culture and making that visible in, update meetings and other initiatives.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talked about linking to outcomes, and one of the one of the big one of the big things that I've heard, and it's been said in different ways, but that what gets measured gets done. And so just thinking about um, culture and metrics and accountability, for you, what are some practical ways that you've seen that, you can measure and manage culture, uh, almost like, and any other business driver, and how can
Yeah,
leaders be more accountable to the cultures,
right.
they shape?
Yeah. Well, first, that's a myth because people like to say that culture can't be measured, and it surely can. And, we're seeing companies really link KPIs and a part of culture to leadership and the deliverables on that. And so it's having, the metrics, but it's also looking beyond the metrics into patterns. This is where the sentiment analysis can become very important in informing for a leader what's going on in their teams and where they might want to make changes. But it really it's really bringing things in and operationalizing and living it. And you can tell when something is really being given genuine attention or not.
Yeah, yeah. And it is so
Y-
true
y-
about, yeah, it is so true about being able to measure, because we've all seen that iceberg,
yes,
the 10% that's visible and the 90% under. And I know even before AI, you were able to get a good understanding of a lot of what was happening in that 90%. But even now with AI and sentiment, we're able to see and feel and measure that other 90% in
yeah,
in
yeah,
ways that leaders
yeah,
never thought
yeah,
possible.
yeah. It's really invaluable. So if people have not experienced that um, sentiment analysis, I'd really encourage that. And it can be woven into a survey or as a complement. It's been invaluable in the work that I do.
Yeah, yeah. And even I know, we saw, we were seeing something, and it was such an anomaly for it was actually one particular plant that this company across North America had, but it was in Kansas. And from a culture perspective, they couldn't understand why sentiment was so different. But then having the context of both the data and as well what was happening within that organization was so beneficial, because what we were able to understand was that previously there'd been a leader who was known to be a bully and harasser, was no longer with the organization, and new leadership was in trying to change things. But that residual impact on the
Yes,
culture and
yes,
people's well-being and
yeah,
psychological
yeah.
safety was still present, and it was going to take
Yeah,
more.
yeah. It's huge, and people have long memories when they've gone through that kind of environment. I had a similar experience with Pepsi and South America in their or South Africa in their bottling division, the lowest performer globally, and a little bit of attention to the sentiment and the people and the culture, and went to be top performer.
Yeah. And I remember a leader saying, well, how long does it take for I'm doing the
Yeah.
work, how long does it take? Well, when when people have gone through crises or trauma, or where they haven't felt safe, um, it does take time, and it
Yeah,
takes that leader
yeah,
leading so that people can actually
yeah,
start to see that
yeah,
there really is a drastic change,
yeah,
and I am safe.
yeah. People can, go numb. It's sort of like a paralysis. It's building, but that's the good news of being in the environment. There's always ways to show trust and respect, and that's where the small gestures and that living every day experience of how you do the work, how it feels to be at work, makes a big difference.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you're a guru in this space. I know that. Uh, the culture space when it comes to mergers and acquisitions.
Oh,
So,
you're
and
going to have to
so
rein me in on this one, Tim. God, I mean, this is a big topic,
it is.
but uh, uh, culture is hugely important for an integration, and I believe it needs to be part of the due diligence. The culture risk to me is just as important as the financial and the business risk. And you start there, and again, this is where you and I have worked together on doing, the culture surveys before the merger even happens to get a sense of what's valued and what they don't want to lose, and then doing a check-in after. And again, the value of the employee sentiment is hugely valuable in this space. But it's very easy for companies to make assumptions because they're looking at making a deal and they can go, well, we're in the same business, we're in the same space, we're in the same geography. How different can our cultures be? Well, hugely different, hugely different. Um, we have a lot of, there's a lot of robust data out there for lessons learned on mergers and acquisitions. But what we've learned is the companies that focus on culture, hands down, do better. Uh, you know, uh, and they come in with this mutual respect. Um, if we look at the Disney and Pixar merger, uh, there was a lot of trepidation. They both had pride and sort of coming in, but there was a decision up front and a lot of cultural respect. Um, and they made it part of the deal, let's not muck with the magic. And so that integration and merger reinvigorated Disney in the animation space, and Pixar was able to leverage the scale of the brand of Disney. So culturally and financially, it became profitable. And if I look in Canada, if we look at Suncor and Petro-Canada, very different cultures, very, very different cultures. One, Suncor was very entrepreneurial. Petro-Canada was seen to be more traditional, but they came in from the get-go, pre-close, that culture and culture respect was important, and they integrated, they stood behind it, and they did a full integration. But they also notice that for the consumer and the retail side, the Petro-Canada brand had a lot of loyalty to it, so they maintained that. So even though they were fully integrated, they had respect, and that respect was so valued, and the impact of that in the cultural integration as part of that merger, where there was big financial aspects to it. Um, but uh, it's just so important. And the one that gets hauled out regularly is what didn't go well because they had no focus on culture, was the Time Warner. Uh, AOL and Time. And so AOL was this scrappy.com, and Time was this traditional media, and it did not pay any attention to culture. And it uh, was purely financial. And it shows what happens if you're not grounded in culture and that intent to bring values and that people-centered focus. It just erodes very quickly into politics, egos, turf wars. It creates all kinds of confusion for employees. Um, uh, that takes, the employees get totally confused. They're not clear in what's expected of them. And that takes years to recover from, if ever. Some really don't really recover because of that long memory. Um, and another thing related to mergers, sometimes people have the perception, oh, they're two small companies, it's going to be easier. Well, when you're a small company going up to probably about, that 400, 500 space, you're going through a lot of change and growth and evolution. And so to bring two small companies together can be quite challenging because one might have a culture that's very informal and the other has started to build some of that formality in. And so you start to see the dynamics of that playing out. And both come together because they're maturing their business. And I'm using maturity here not from length of years in business, but growing the sophistication of their functions and moving beyond generalists to go into specialists. So they're, um, and this is where, operationalizing the values and doing that well really support the culture uh, initiatives and just bringing it top of mind, having the different checkpoints within the organization in how's it feel? How are you feeling? And, because mergers are emotional and operational. And and we need to pay attention to both.
Yeah. And it's so overlooked, and for companies and leaders, they spend so much time on, the due diligence and the all of the accounting and the legal and all of those people, and they've always said our most our most valuable resource is our people. But
Right,
then in the end,
right.
that
Yeah,
falls that falls
right.
off.
Right. And this myth of culture taking a long time. So it can be, well, it's going to take years. So we can push that out, okay, because we're going to be working on it over many years when you really need to be bringing it in and sort of listening and doing those small acts and supporting. And so it becomes very, very important.
Yeah. Well, somehow we're nearly at time. what a great what a great discussion. Do you have do you have any closing thoughts for those that are listening in?
Well, I think it's leading with curiosity, looking for the connection. That's what motivates all of us. Um, and, if you're feeling something, you can trust that others are and leaning into that. But that it's balancing this connection point and building the connection is very important and actually is a big supporter of the outcomes that you want to change and deliver on. And, to ignore it can really create a drag factor on because the organization gets distracted. It we're in an age where people expect it and they want to, and they'll call it out for attention.
Yeah.
And why do we want to say we've arrived? We want to keep evolving and growing and stretching, and that can feel vulnerable for leaders. They, want to say, well, I'm here, I'm at the executive level, and it's no, allow the stretch, right? Allow that vulnerability to come into the dialogue.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely brilliant. And thank you so much. And one of the notes I took was it was where is the friction? I love it.
Yes.
I'm gonna leverage it. And Colleen, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for joining. And I know Leanne has put Colleen's LinkedIn into the chat as well. Please do sign up for our next webinar, which is on May the 7th, and it's going to be another great one about transitioning from traditional change management to AI enabled change, which couldn't be more timely. But what a discussion, what a conversation. Thank you, Colleen.
Thank
Absolutely
you.
brilliant insights, and
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
looking forward to getting this out to everyone.
Yes, great. I hope people got some practical. It was a little high level and a quick touchdown on a lot of topics, but a very important one. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Colleen, and we will see you soon. And have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Y-
Bye for now.